Welcome to Relationship Talk, the podcast where we have real conversations about love, well-being, dating, and relationships. In today's episode, I had a nuanced conversation with Bryan Power, who is an integrated attachment theory coach. In 2024, Bryan and his wife would go from having a pretty good relationship to a complete relationship failure that culminated with a restraining order that his wife put against him for her emotional safety. During their time apart, Bryan and his wife would work on themselves, and that work would ultimately allow them to put their relationship back together. Now, Bryan shares his story and teaches others how to use the integrated attachment theory program that helps save his marriage and provides the tools necessary to continue having the healthy, happy relationship today. You can find out more about Bryan's deep work in the show notes. During this conversation, Bryan shares what attachment is and how it shapes the way we show up in relationships. He dives into the 6 core pillars within the integrated attachment theory program and the transformative ways it brings together tools that help us understand ourselves and our patterns to positively influence our relationships. He explains why even if the work is not done as a couple, one person can begin the process and still potentially shift the dynamic. Alongside what ongoing relationship fitness looks like and how couples or individuals can keep these tools alive once they begin the journey, and so much more. You are about to get the whole RLT, aka Relationship Talk, so you're going to want to watch the entire episode. I hope you will find this episode as supportive as I did. And remember to subscribe, hit that like button and that notification bell. I'm Teresha Young, your international wellness and relationship coach. Enjoy, take notes, and get ready to apply all key messages you take away today. Hello, Bryan. How are you doing today?
I'm doing great, Teresha. Thank you so much for having me on the show today. I'm really excited to be able to share my story and some of the information that I'm about to share with your audience. I'm hoping that we're going to be able to save some relationships, and hopefully they won't have to go through some of what I went through last year. But pleasure to be here. Thank you so much for having me on the show today.
You're so welcome. Welcome to the show. And I couldn't wait to dive into this because this is a bit of a nuance in terms of what we're going to be talking about today. So, Bryan, please explain with us, with the audience as well, what led you to become an integrated attachment theory coach?
Yeah, it's been a long journey. I'm 57 years old at this point, and really through my adult life, I've kind of struggled with a lot of relationships and didn't really know how to do them right, didn't know how to kind of really get my needs met and all this other stuff. And it's just been a struggle. And then in 2024, I'd been with my wife at that point almost 9 years, and we had some fights along the way, but nothing too crazy. But things would really devolve into complete emotional chaos early in February 2024. Things started to really go down, and then she would challenge me to see a therapist. So I agreed, and I said, "Oh, fair enough. I'll take a look at that and see if I can learn something." But I also challenged her to see a therapist
Mm.
because in my mind, of course, she was the one with all the issues. And of course, in her mind, I was the one with all the issues. And so the first thing I learned is we all have issues. We really got to kind of take a look at ourselves and this stuff. And so, but that began the journey of us like trying to get some healing and really doing some work there. But it also began to trigger some stuff as we were seeing our therapist, our childhood trauma was starting to play out. And a lot of these, subconscious wounds and stuff were being touched on both sides. And it became an emotional just clash to the point where she would eventually put a restraining order against me for emotional safety. It was never physical. I never, threatened my wife with physical harm or anything like that. But emotionally, we were just a mess. And she finally kind of put that in order, online, if you will, put that order in place, if you will. And that really separated us. At that point, I thought it was over. I thought it was done. Didn't have any hope for the relationship. I was just trying to put my life back together and trying to figure out how to move on from this whole thing, and didn't understand what happened. It was just kind of such a whirlwind. But I was fortunate enough to have come across attachment theory and then the integrated attachment theory program created by Thais Gibson. And along with the therapy that I was doing, this work would actually really kind of revolutionize the way I was kind of thinking about relationships and how I was doing things. And it really changed the game, if you will, for me. And so I just really loved the work and kind of really got so deep into it. And Thais Gibson runs a coaching program, teaches people how to be some coaches. And I decided I want to do that. I feel like this is something that I was called to do. And I feel like this is my mission now. I'm really on a mission just to save as many relationships as possible because I know that there's nothing worse in the world than losing the person you love
Mm.
simply because you don't have the tools necessary to keep them. So that's what kind of led me here, and it's been a crazy journey, if you will. But happy to be here, and yeah, it's been crazy.
Yeah, thank you for sharing that. I think it's
Yeah.
really relatable in terms of the efforts that people put in order to work through a relationship, and then some of the triggers, some of the emotions, some of the behaviors that can be elicited from that work that starts to be done. So, for anybody who is new to this area, then Brian, how would you describe what attachment actually is and how it shapes the way that we show up in a relationship?
Yeah, attachment theory was created really in the 1950s. It became more popular in the 1970s, and it's been around for a little while, but it's really the talk of the town, if you will. Nowadays, people are really talking about attachment theory. And what it comes down to is there's four different attachment styles, and it has to do with the way we attach in relationships. Not just to our spouse, but also to our friends, family, and everything else. But what they found is there's four different styles. Number one, you have a healthy or secure attachment style. That's somebody who really is emotionally balanced, really knows how to communicate well, really knows how to kind of set some boundaries. They value relationships, but then it's not hypercritical if the relationship doesn't work out. They might be upset about that, but they know how to kind of move on and just accept it as kind of that's the way it is sometimes. It's just they're the healthy ones that we all want to be, and unfortunately, most of us don't fall in that category. Most of us fall in the other three categories. And those are number one, you have what's called an anxious preoccupied attachment style. And anxious preoccupieds really value connection. They really crave relationships to the point where it becomes unhealthy. Over communicating, a lot of times they communicating all day long, 10 times a day, if you will, texting all the time, always kind of wanting to know where you are, to the point again where it's just unhealthy. A lot of times codependency can become an issue. Um, and it's just not a good way to go. So that's one side. On the flip side is what's called a dismissive avoidant. And dismissive avoidants really have a hard time connecting with their emotions. They have a hard time connecting with people. And so they want that, but they don't know how to do it. And a lot of times they feel like they're broken, they feel like they're damaged. They feel like there's something wrong with them. If they do feel emotions, they isolate a lot. They're hyper independent. So if they're feeling emotional, they're going to want to withdraw a little bit. Whereas an anxious preoccupied, if they're feeling emotional, they want to get closer.
Yeah,
And so you can see if these two are in a relationship together, that can really cause a problem. And a lot of
yeah.
times it's those wounds that are kind of playing out in this whole dynamics. And then last but not least is what's called a fearful avoidant, or some people call it a disorganized attachment style. And that's somebody who's just kind of swings both ways. They actually have a lot of the wounds of the anxious preoccupied, and then they also kind of lean a little dismissive at times. And so they're kind of all over the board. Betrayal is a big wound for them. Also, again, fear of being alone or fear of being abandoned. They have a lot of those wounds on both sides of the table here, but also, again, a very unhealthy, approach to relationships because, again, the subconscious, and this is one thing that I learned tremendously, is that the subconscious is the one that's kind of causing all, the way we behave, the way we think about these things. And a lot of times, so 95 to 97% of our decisions are made by the subconscious, and that the conscious cannot overpower or outwill the subconscious. And so in relationships, we're doing things subconsciously that we don't even realize we're doing sometimes. And a lot of times, if they're unhealthy, which most of the times they are, we're causing problems in the relationship that we don't even understand yet. Until we become aware of them and are able to change that, we're going to stay stuck in these cycles of broken relationships, difficult relationships, problems in relationships. Even if you're managed to stay together, it may not be always optimal. It's more of a struggle rather than a joy. And so I love the work that Thais Gibson is doing. And she created what's called integrated attachment theory. And that actually helps us move from the unhealthy attachment styles into the healthy attachment style. And to me, it's been a game changer. So
Wow. Thank you for that really in-depth conversation that you just
yeah,
shared with us there, because people might be thinking, well, typically, if I'm single, for example, I'm a pretty secure person. I feel how, but then as
sure.
soon as I get into a relationship, I'm either quite needy, quite anxious. So is it possible to flip into attachment styles and flip across, for
You
example?
can. So I'm a big believer that I feel like a lot of us lean into that fearful or disorganized attachment style, and we can sometimes lean more anxious, and we can lean also dismissive, depending upon the relationship and the
Mm,
dynamics of that. Sometimes, not everybody is, but that definitely is a prevalent thing that happens a lot. And I always say, as far as being secure when you're single, yeah, it's easy. I would say everybody's secure until hits the fan, until the
Yeah.
emotions, yeah, right, until the emotions really come out, until the situation gets really dire and desperate, and things start really happening. Then all of a sudden you realize, whoa, wait a second, maybe I'm not as secure as I thought I was, because I thought I was secure too.
Yeah.
When my wife and I were starting to have problems, consciously I was very secure. I'm an older guy. I'm conscious. I'm confident. I'm like, okay, but the subconscious wounds, those are the ones that start getting triggered, and that's really what I became very aware of, and started to realize, like, wow, I couldn't stop the train wreck, even though consciously I knew I was one way. Subconsciously, all those wounds were playing out and touching the emotional state in such a manner that it became obvious that I wasn't really in control of that. It was a
Yes.
different dynamic. So yeah, it's easy to be secure when you don't have anything on the line.
Mm. So, talking about these subconscious wounds that can come up for us, maybe that's something that is involved in the integrated attachment theory program. Could you share with us a bit more about what that looks like and how that differs from anything else that people might have been hearing with regards to attachment styles?
I mean, if you're looking for some of the core wounds, so some of the wounds would be like for fearful avoidance. A big one is like I will be betrayed. I am unsafe. That's a big one for all three, is the feeling of being unsafe. I am unworthy. I am bad. At the core, they sometimes feel like they're bad. Abandonment is a big one also for fearful avoidance. Those are some big ones there. As far as anxious, or excuse me, dismissive avoidance. Again, unsafe is a big one. Defective. I am defective. They have the feeling of that there's something wrong with them. I am trapped. They're very fearful of being trapped. That's a big one for them. They like their independence. They feel sometimes helpless or incapable, and not good enough is another big one for them. Anxious, preoccupied, fear of abandonment is a huge one. That was my big one, is the fear of abandonment. I have a strong abandonment wound, if you will. Again, being unsafe is a big one. I will be alone. Fear of being alone for the rest of their lives. And so that's also, again, why they sometimes get clingy, because they have these underlying fears. They have these underlying wounds that are causing them to grab onto that relationship. So those are some of the big ones. Also, I'm not good enough. I'll be rejected. So those are some of the big ones for all the anxious, preoccupied. So those core wounds are really what's driving the subconscious into these unhealthy states in these relationships. And we don't even realize they're actually driving the bus, but they are. Yeah.
Oh, wow. Brian, that's really, really deep because when people think about some of those key phrases that you've said there, such as, no, I am, I am bad, or I am not worthy, or I feel unsafe. I think a lot of people who are listening to this will really be able to resonate with those phrases that are coming through, but not necessarily linking it, therefore, to the behavior that will come out of
Yeah,
those feelings as well, because it's generally the thoughts and the feelings that will trigger the actions and the behaviors that we take.
that's
So
right.
please lead us into how the integrated attachment theory program works then.
Well, what I love about Thais Gibson, and it's Thais Gibson, Gibson. The work that she created was, again, called integrated attachment theory, and it's based off attachment theory, the four attachment styles. And what she determined was she created 6 pillars to actually help us move from the unhealthy attachment styles into the secure attachment style. And those pillars are this: number one, it's your core wounds. Those are the ones we just talked about. So how do we have to become aware of those, and then we have to begin to heal those core wounds, okay? And there are some exercises you can do to kind of begin that process. Number two, it's your needs. It's really uncovering, discovering what our true needs are, what we really need to feel fulfilled and happy, and then learning how to fulfill those on our own. So we're not outsourcing our needs to everybody else. We have to fulfill those on our own, so now we have more control. Number three is our emotions. Okay, how do we use our emotions for something good? There's nothing wrong with our emotions. Our emotions are simply information. They're telling us something there. So what we have to do is backtrack that a little bit into what is the thought and the belief that I ultimately have behind that that's causing the emotion. So we always say that beliefs lead to your thoughts lead to your emotions, and then your emotions will lead to your actions. So I just have to backtrack that a little bit. If I'm feeling, let's say I'm feeling really scared or unsafe, I'm feeling really fearful. Why am I feeling fearful? What is the thought that I have? And then maybe at the behind that is, what is the core belief that I have about myself that's causing me to feel this fear, if you will. Number four is boundaries. How do we set boundaries, right? Good, healthy boundaries. A lot of times, anxious, preoccupieds have zero boundaries. They don't care. They're kind of more like whatever it takes to keep the relationship in order is fine. And then dismissive avoidance sometimes have extreme boundaries.
Mm.
Also, again, not healthy ones. So we have to find some middle ground that are healthy, good boundaries, and then learn how to kind of talk about those and make sure that people kind of adhere to them a little bit. I always say the boundaries are like the fence around the house. that protect the house, and we're the house, so we got to have some boundaries to help protect the house, if you will. Number five is communication. I find this one's huge. This was a big one for my wife and I. We just, trying to communicate. A lot of times we're trying to say the same thing, but we're speaking different languages. And until we really learn how to speak the same language in this thing and understand each other and learn to listen and speak and learn to listen properly and learn to, understand and not just listen to defend ourselves, which is something that I was doing. And I think a lot of us do is we're always listening to defend our side of it. But again, listening to move the needle, learning to listen to understand our partner and learn from them so we can grow together and actually solve some problems. And number six is our behaviors. How do I change my behaviors on a regular basis that so I can act in a manner that is healthier and more becoming of a man, if you will. And so again, just changing all those six factors as we begin to work on each one, it begins to really move the needle. And what I
Mm.
love about that is I can look at six different things and say, okay, I know I lack here. I need to do a little bit better on this. Okay, I need to do a little better here. And as I start to do some work, I can get a little bit better and I can see that progress. I can almost judge myself, give myself a little bit of a grade, if you will, and realize, okay, wait a second, but now I'm making some ground. Now I feel like, oh, wow, I can see some progress. I've learned how to communicate better. I've learned how to maybe set some boundaries. I've learned, change some of my behaviors. And all of a sudden you're like, wow, I'm doing things a lot differently and things are working with my spouse in a totally different way. So it's pretty exciting when that happens.
It is. And these six pillars that you've walked us through, is it done in that particular order when you first start the program?
Not necessarily. I mean, sometimes we may have to, do something out of order, but I do believe that the at the base of it is the core wounds. I truly believe that the core wounds are really the heart of that thing. We really got to tap into that and understand what's really kind of subconsciously driving the bus here. All those other things will play into that and work off of that. But no, it doesn't necessarily mean we have to go in that order. Sometimes we may have to address a situation, right? We may need to set some boundaries this week because our spouse is acting a certain way, or maybe it's something we need to really kind of focus on this week is, hey, let's set some boundaries.
Yeah.
Whereas next week, it may be like we have some more time to focus on what do we need in our life? What's really important? How do we kind of do some work and discover that? Maybe it's communication this week. Yay, my wife and I, we had problems. We had a big fight because we didn't communicate properly. Maybe we need to talk about that this week.
Yes.
And so
Yeah.
it can go out of order, but all of those are, I think, equally important.
Yes.
But I do believe at the heart of that all is those core wounds. Those are the ones that we got to really work on.
Yeah. What I like about how you have the particular structure, one, two, three, you've got the core wounds, you've got the needs, and you've got the emotions. So that's a lot of inner work that you're doing on yourself first before you're
Yeah.
even thinking about communication style, before you're even thinking about boundaries. It's
Yep.
actually doing that inner work first. So when I reached out to my community and I said that we're going to be having a discussion shortly on the attachment styles, I had a couple of audience questions come through actually, Brian. And one person came through and said, I'm doing a lot of inner work, like what we have said there with the core wounds, but I still struggle to tell whether my relationship is just going through a difficult phase or if it actually is unhealthy for me. How can I
Yeah.
tell the difference?
Yeah, that's challenging. That's a good question. It comes back to a personal decision, really, a little bit there. You gotta, it depends upon how much time you have in with this person. It depends on the type of connection you're feeling. Is your spouse, are they also trying to work on themselves a little bit? Do you see the needle moving a little bit, or is it just you've been stuck here for 6 months, a year, 2 years now, and and nothing's really changing per se. So it really is a personal thing. This kind of feel that out a little bit and decide is this something I need to kind of end, or is it something that is salvageable here still, and can we move the needle? And again, it really depends upon how long you have invested. Are you married with kids? Or are you just, if you're 6 months into a relationship and it's not, then it's easier to maybe say, yeah, this is a red flag. This is maybe time to cut the ties on this thing. But if you've been with somebody for 10 years, you have some kids, you have, more time and everything else together, you may want to give it more time, right? And you really kind of want to see if you can really give it that time to see if your spouse will come along eventually. I always say keep doing the work yourself, keep getting stronger, keep figuring this out for yourself. And then eventually you will get to that point where you know a little bit more securely, like, yeah, this isn't salvageable anymore. And it is maybe time to move on. Or you see your spouse coming along with you a little bit, which is exciting. You see your spouse changing a little bit. All of a sudden the relationship is getting a little bit better. And then
Yes.
that can keep you, maybe gives you a little bit more like, okay, this is becoming a little bit more doable, and just give it that time. But it's a personal decision. That's a tough one.
Okay. Well, thank you for answering that because what you were talking about there, I did have a question on that because I was thinking, if the work is not done as a couple, because you talk about bringing the person along with you, can one person begin the process and still potentially shift the dynamic of the relationship.
Absolutely, absolutely. I heard somebody put it to me this way, and I love it. It's two is better than one, one is better than none.
Mm,
Okay, so yes, optimally, you would love to have both people working on that together, but that's not often the case.
yes.
Most of the time, it's going to be one person taking the lead and saying, I'm willing to make some changes. I'm ready to go forward. I want to do something different here. And just learning this stuff and you yourself changing the dynamics of how you're doing things with your spouse, that and understanding their attachment styles, sometimes their wounds, and starting to see how where these things are not right and learning some new tools that can actually kind of do things differently, you start implementing that, that alone can absolutely change the dynamics of that relationship. And a lot of times that spouse will start to realize it may take a few months, it may take a
Yeah.
little while, right? Depending upon how long it's been together, all this stuff. But eventually if you keep at that, all of a sudden they go, wait a second, yeah, this is different. You're not doing the same things
Mm,
that you were for the last 5 years. All of a sudden you're communicating there. I see you're more emotionally balanced. I see you're doing these things there. And now all of a sudden they may get more interested. They actually may want to learn this stuff more intimate. And even if they don't, because of the way you're handling it, that relationship is beginning to change. So absolutely, don't be afraid to take the reins, take the lead, do it yourself. And number one, we cannot change the other person anyway. We cannot force them to come along with us. So if they decide, I don't want to learn anything, I want to stay stuck here, we may outgrow them. And that is the thing that they have to accept. Because if we learn this stuff and we do outgrow them and they say, hey, they're still stuck in that negative kind of,
mm,
vibe, if you will, it may come a point where I have to end this relationship. This is no longer healthy for me. This is no longer serving me. And it's not because I don't want this to work. It's just that you weren't willing to come with me on this journey. And now we've come to a point where it is a problem. And sometimes that's unfortunately where that happens. But I do feel like a lot of times, more than not, you'll see more positive than negative. But sometimes it works out that way. Yeah.
yeah. So we've got the grow and outgrow scenario there where potentially it could fall into.
Yeah.
So for example, let's say you're doing work, because I know in our intro call you compared relationship work to like building fitness,
Yeah.
basically.
Yeah. Yeah.
I absolutely love that. So what does ongoing relationship fitness look like for a couple?
Yeah, I think as you just continue to do this work, for example, my wife and I look back at the way, we would have these discussions and we would be a little bit emotionally triggered and she would try to talk to me, right? And I would naturally just listen to defend. And every
Mm,
time she would try to talk, I'd break in mid-sentence sometimes and she would get frustrated. And it was just not communicating. We weren't really listening to each other. We weren't really moving the needle.
yeah.
And now when we communicate, I learned that it's important for me to keep quiet and let her speak for 5 or 10 minutes. And we look each other right in the eye when we do this. I'll look at her right in the eye for 5 or 10 minutes. She will talk about the situation, tell me her feelings on it, her thoughts about this particular situation. And now I'm listening to understand her and comprehend what she's saying. And I want to understand this woman. I love her. I want to know this woman. So now then when she's done, I get to go and I get to speak for 5 or 10 minutes. And then without her interrupting me, and she's now listening to understand me and comprehend my side of things, my thoughts about the situation. And when we do it this way, it's a game changer. It's like, wow, wait a sec. We both feel heard. We both feel more understood. We may not even agree. Sometimes we still disagree, but we can walk away feeling like, okay, I've got your perspective. I can sit on that a little bit and maybe think about that. And at least now we both feel heard. We feel a little bit more understood, and we're not frustrated yelling at each other. So when you do something like that and you do an exercise like that and it works, you start to go, wow, wait a second. All right, that's a new tool. I'm going to remember that one, right?
Yes.
So, or if I set a little boundary, something simple where it's like, hey, you know what, I may tell a friend, hey, listen, past, 9 o'clock, I'm in bed. Like, please don't contact me unless you're extremely important. It's very important for me to get to bed. I've got a family, kids, business. Now, if my friend keeps calling me at 9:30, 10 o'clock, that's a problem, right? I may have to address that. And how do I say to my friend, hey, listen, this is important to me. I've got to kind of go there. So you just start to learn all these little things. And as you begin to implement, you start to see things change. And
Mm,
usually for the better. Sometimes it takes more time, but a lot of times eventually you'll see like things are different. Your life will change in the next few months. And all of a sudden you look back and go, wow, this is working in a way that I'd never understood it could work this way because I didn't have those tools. Once
mm.
you get the tools, you begin to be able to handle these things in a different way. And now it moves the needle so much better, and you start to see that you're like, oh yeah, no, this is clearly different than what it was before.
Yeah, that's amazing, Brian, because I can imagine that those type of habits and practices is what's embedded in those pillars. So the communication techniques that you shared there, I would
Yeah.
imagine that's part of the communication pillar. That's how you learn to do that. Is that
Yeah.
correct?
Yeah,
Yeah,
absolutely. Yeah. Just takes a
yeah,
little time and willingness to try it, you know?
yeah. So when we talk about the pillars and needs, for example, there's a difference between needs because we all have needs, we're human beings, and neediness.
Yeah.
How can someone discover what the difference is? How am I going to differentiate if I'm being needy, as in
Yeah.
needy, or is that actually just a really core human need I have?
Yeah, that's a good question, and that's a gray area too. That there's very fine line sometimes. I mean, there's I think there's a difference between saying like, okay, yeah, I need a little time with you. I need to be able to kind of spend, let's just say I need one night a week to be able to communicate and connect with you, compared to saying I need you every night. I need it has to be all the time. And now it's at a level 10 trigger where like if I don't get to connect, it's like, oh my God, I'm losing it. I can't handle this situation. So there's a fine line between like, yes, I need some connection, I need
Yes.
some of that, but becoming to the point where it's you need it all the time, and you need to, constantly have that reassurance, constantly have that connection, constantly have all this lifeline. If it feels like, if you're at that point, then that's an unhealthy zone. But it's definitely tough to kind of figure that out sometimes. Sure.
Yeah, yeah. And I would imagine that that neediness feeling, if it's kind of derived from a wound, that is probably a clear indication that that's neediness and not
Yeah.
necessarily a need, isn't it? When you start
Yeah,
to
and
do
that's
that
usually what
inner,
it is. Yeah, that's
yeah,
usually what it is. It's usually that wound that's driving that fear, that's driving that idea that I have to have this type of thing. Yeah, it's more
yeah,
from a wounded spot. Yeah.
yeah, exactly. Rather than, oh, yeah, I need you to be with me. That's because I feel abandoned or I feel
Right.
rejected, rather than actually I like quality time, for example, and it's coming from
Correct.
a place of love rather than fear.
Correct. Correct.
That's
That's a great way to put that, and that's so true. Exactly. When you're in a relationship together, we don't want to have to need somebody to the point where we're holding on and we're like, holding on to them for survival, because eventually we're drowning that person too. We're taking it down, if you will. It becomes very unhealthy, and so we want to be able to love each other freely. We want to be able to choose love. We want to be able to, you know, want to, like you said, I want to spend some quality time with you, but also be okay if it doesn't happen per se, and so have that balance emotionally. And that's where we want to get to, where we can just kind of like, yes, we have those needs, we have desires that are important to us. And certainly, we want to have those met a little bit, but at the same time, we're going to be okay, even if we don't always get those. And then learn how to kind of get a lot of connection on our own, learn how to get some of these, again, needs met on our own. So we're feeling it more in control. We don't have to have our spouse fulfill everything that, we think we need. We can do most of that on our own, and it becomes a much healthier way to go.
Yeah. So it's interdependence, really, because you can have your independence, you can be
Right.
together, but that interdependence means that
That's
you can
right.
do it on yourself and yet you can still come together in a
Absolutely.
way
That's
there.
beautiful when you do it that way. Yep.
Yeah, oh, it is amazing. I have another audience question actually. You may have covered it, but I'm going to ask it anyway, just
Yeah.
because it's a question. So this person says, I think I might have an insecure attachment style,
Mm.
but I honestly don't know where to start. What's one simple thing I can do to begin changing my behavior?
I mean, the begin changing. So first and foremost, I recommend everybody go check out Thais Gibson's video on YouTube with Mel Robbins. It's on the Mel Robbins podcast. Thais Gibson, Thais Gibson, and she will talk about the four different attachment styles. She gets really in depth with all four of the different styles and some of their wounds and stuff. And at the end of that, I think you really get a good. And this is the one that caught me because this is the one that hooked me into all this. So once I saw that video, and I was like, wow, I saw a lot of answers there. And I saw myself acting I was more at the time anxious. I saw my wife was leaning a lot of dismissive. And so I was able to see her, I was able to see me, and that began my journey. And then as I decided to get more involved into this and really look into it, I joined the personal development school, which is her school that really begins to teach these things that we're talking about here today. And you can join her school through my website at My Relationship Fail. And when you do that, I want to give you a free session anyway. I want to talk to you. I want to hear your story. I want to see if we can get you going in the right direction. And yeah, if you think you're leaning anxious, you probably are. Again, think about those wounds: fear of abandonment, fear of being alone, not good enough, feeling unsafe. You start to think about those, and you say, "Oh yeah, I've probably got a few of those." Yeah, you may be, And again, if connection and communication is constant, and you're feeling like all that, you start to realize, "Oh, wait a second, maybe I have something else going on here." And that's what I saw. And that's why I love this work, because it made sense to me. Once I heard that, I was like, oh, wait a second. That's normal. It's something that I learned through my childhood. It's really what we learn mostly in our childhood. And because I came from a very dysfunctional family and my father abandoned us, my father was in and out of my childhood throughout my, early years, if you will, and it was always chaos and craziness. That's where I developed my fear of abandonment, and so it really came back to my father. And but again, here I am playing this out in my adult relationships, and now I'm causing problems and my inability to have a very good, healthy relationship because of that. So yeah, just got to take a look at it, question it, and then figure it out. Yeah, if I have an issue, then we can start to work on it.
Okay. That's an important point that you make there, Brian, as well, is that our attachment styles are, quite clearly derived from our upbringing as a child. Now, you don't necessarily have to go and heal that relationship with that person who may have triggered that core wound. This is work that you can do without having to revisit trauma, so to speak, if that's the case.
Yeah, absolutely. No, it has nothing to do with going back per se like that, but we can understand and see where it came from a lot of times, and we can say, okay, yeah, if I look at my family sometimes, and sometimes it's family. You can come from a very healthy family and still develop some subconscious, trauma. Little experiences can also develop even when you have good, healthy parents. So it's just something that's going on there subconsciously that we have working in our bodies, in our minds, if you will, that's causing some problems. And again, it can come from very dysfunctional families. When you come from very dysfunctional, yeah, you probably got some issues there. It's a little bit more prevalent probably and more obvious because you're like, hey, yeah, I came from, if you came from a war-torn zone, if you will, a child that grew up in that, yeah, you can see where they may have some issues. But if you come from a family where mom and dad were pretty much all there all the time and they really treated you pretty well, but you still seem to have a fear of abandonment, why? Maybe I have a fear of abandonment because maybe mom and dad left me with the babysitter because they had to both go to work. And so, but that child feels like they're being abandoned. So they don't know that mom and dad are just going to work. Mom and dad, see what I'm saying? So sometimes we just have those wounds, even from good, healthy situations. But at the end of the day, it doesn't matter where we got them. It's the fact that we have them and we now have to fix them, or they're going to continue to kind of destroy us, if you will. So that's the main thing.
So the program, how long typically does it last? And is it a one and done, or do you bounce back over the pillars?
No, I feel like it's a lifetime journey per se, but I do feel like you can make a lot of ground in literally just a couple of weeks, up to a few months. I always challenge my people at least give it 3 months at least, before you really start to kind of move, and you'll start to see. I think within 3 months, if you're really doing the work, you can really see some good progress there, and you'll start to really change a lot. But I feel like that I'm still learning. I'm a teacher and a coach, but honestly, I'm still learning this stuff. I feel like there's so much to learn here. It's a lot of great information to continue this process. Relationships always change. There's always dynamics that are kind of get a little funky, a little crazy, which makes it interesting. It keeps it a little interesting too. But no, just start off. The main thing is start. Begin the process, right?
Yes.
Don't worry if it takes 2 weeks to 2 months to 2 years. No worries. Let's just move the needle. But the key is to see that things are moving the needle a little bit. Sometimes people get stuck in therapy. Maybe they're going to a therapist for 5 or 10 years and it seems like nothing's changing. I don't suggest, I
Yeah.
always say, feel like, go. I think therapy is great. If the needle's moving, that's great. But be open to trying something else if that one isn't working for you. If this is working for you, you get into this and all of a sudden, yeah, you start to realize, wow, a month or two, you're starting to get answers like I was. You're starting to get excited about that. You're starting to see things change, then yeah, keep going with that. Keep absolutely progressing and until you get to a pretty strong point. Like I said, my wife and I are doing great today, but that doesn't mean we're perfect. It doesn't mean that I can't continue to learn and understand even deeper levels because I think there's more layers of the onion, if you will, to peel. And so it's just exciting to do that. But yeah, the key first and foremost is just start the process and go for it. But
Just start, yeah.
yeah,
So we're talking about the conversations that you've been having with your wife actually, and the great communication techniques and tools that you have. Do
yeah.
you schedule in audits, like relationship audits, or just how are we doing relationship check-ins, like on a weekly basis? Does that form part of your
Yeah,
dynamic?
Yeah, no, absolutely. We do in a little bit of a way. I mean, a lot, I can just sometimes look at her and say, is there anything we need to talk about? Or is everything
Yeah.
okay? And she'll be like, no, everything's fine. Okay. And I want to trust that because, I don't want to, like if she knows that if something wasn't, then she knows that she can say, yeah, no, we need to talk about something. Okay, fine. So it's more just being conscious of each other on a regular basis. I can see when she's a little bit off emotionally, and sometimes I can give her a little bit of that space and a little bit the ability to kind of back off a little, but also let her know that I'm there if she needs to. That's my wife. She likes a little bit more space. She doesn't want to sometimes when she's processing, right? She needs to to take that time alone. And so that's where I have to learn how to back off a little bit and also give her that space. And that's something that I've learned. So just learning those little things and being in tune with your spouse a little bit and just being open to whatever needs to kind of go on here. If my wife needs excuse me, if my wife needs space, then I want to give her that space. If she needs some time to communicate and she does want to discuss something, then she knows that we can discuss it. So it's
Yeah.
just being free to be able to do either or as needed, you know?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So through your work with doing this, I know that you are on a journey yourself, being a coach and also being the learner on the process. Have you had any other people that you worked with or in the program say, aha, that pillar was the biggest one, that one had the biggest impact on my life and my relationship?
Yeah, I mean, as I work with some people, they all have different ones, and yeah, the biggest one is the one that you just nailed this week, right? So, if all of a sudden you did something great with communication, you're like, oh my God, that was amazing!
Yeah.
Like, what a difference, Next week, if you set a boundary and somebody,
Yeah.
you did that, you're like, oh my God, that was amazing.
Yeah.
So they're all just great. They really are just exciting, and I think the most exciting for me is I came from such dysfunctional background and my inability to really comprehend and understand this stuff, and now to feel like at this age to finally get tools and really kind of understand what a relationship dynamics are and what we need to do in a relationship. And now
Mm,
as I begin to build these tools and put them in my tool belt, if you will, I feel like I can build any relationship and have a good strong relationship, number one with myself,
yeah.
also number two with my spouse, and then friends, and really figure out who's really belongs in my life and who doesn't sometimes. I want real, right? Real
Yes.
relationships.
Yes.
Yeah,
You got that then.
right. So that's the key is, and as the more I learn this stuff, I really learn, how to do that. And that's the excited part. But yeah, the one that's the most exciting is the one you just did this week and nailed and saw some progress. It's so exciting when that happens.
Oh, it is. Brian, I want to ask you as well because you have been on a journey with your partner and of course this the separation, the healing work, all of that you have done. So your relationship dynamic has had many different twists and turns and you've come back together. So before I move on to the question I'm going to ask, I just want everyone to know that Brian did mention the link to the program, and all of the links are going to be in the show notes, just so that you know that. But what I wanted to ask you was, what's your personal definition of love in
Oh,
the romantic front? What does it mean to you?
man, that's a great question. How to define that? Boy, I don't know. I guess for me, love is like an action. Love is it's a daily experience. It can be a bit emotional, but I always say love is kind of like a verb, right? It's an action. It's what we do on a daily basis to actually show love and to be loving and all that other stuff. And yeah, just boy, that's such a good question. I
So
really,
personal. I love asking, and the
it
audience
really
love to
is.
hear.
It really is. I mean, again, I think the emotions come up. Like we talk about love, love is emotional, and so it's this fun thing. But I think at the end of the day, love is a choice. Love is something we choose to do, and we choose to honor that person, honor ourselves, and to just be graceful and be kind, and all those things kind of wrapped into that word called love. I think it's a little bit of all those things for me,
Yeah,
anyway. That's a
I love
great
what
question, though.
I'm glad you think so. And I love your share there in terms of all of those different components and ingredients when it comes to love. And it's so personal, so unique to each person who I ask. So I absolutely love this integrated attachment theory process and the program. And those 6 pillars really resonate with me because when I'm doing my own coaching work with my clients, I absolutely touch upon those ones because what you are building there ultimately is an element of safety, safety with yourself so that you can trust yourself and
Absolutely.
trust your decisions and feel safe, but then also be able to build safety in your relationship dynamic, with your boundaries, with your communication, with your behaviors. So I'm absolutely, I love the actual ethos of this program. Is there anything more that you want to share about it that we haven't already spoken about that would be helpful for the audience to know?
I mean, the only thing I love to share is I just like to, say to anybody out there who's struggling in relationships, who's dealt with like bad relationships their entire lives and feeling frustrated that it's never going to change and you don't know how to make this stuff work. I promise you, I want to say that that's not true. Anything can change. Absolutely. I don't care where the dynamics are in your relationship today. If you're on the verge of breaking up, or maybe you've even broken up not for this time being, you're separated, whatever it might be. if you do the work, if you really let things go, first thing we got to let things go because we can't control the situations a lot of times. We just have to kind of accept certain things about the way things have happened. That's just life. But if we can do that, embrace that, and say, okay, it is what it is. Now I want to take this though and learn from it. I want to make this a great experience. I always say they call it a breakup, not a breakdown. We're going to use this breakup to level up. We're going to break upwards. We're going to level up in our lives because of this time away. The only way to do that, though, is to do the work. So if we do the work, then we are going to level up. If we don't do the work, then we're going to stay stuck and maybe even go back the other way. So use this time wisely, get some healing, get some knowledge. This can be the greatest time and the greatest experience of your life. I went through the craziest, most difficult, challenging relationship moment of my life, but it would actually prove to be the greatest thing in my life because of that willingness to kind of go through that, learn from it, grow from it, change from it. And now all of a sudden on the backside, my wife and I were able to put all this back together. And if you'd have told me we were going to get back together, I'd have said, no way. Like once the restraining order came on, it was game over. This relationship was done. So I don't care if your spouse tells you they hate you. I don't care if they feel like it's over, they're done. And it may be, I can't guarantee, again, we don't know the outcome, but I do know if you do the work, then anything is possible. And so I always say, just do the work, relax, breathe. It's going to be okay. Even if your spouse doesn't come back to you, you will put yourself in a position to have a great relationship with somebody else, and you will ultimately have that opportunity. It's not the end. I feel like there's wonderful people out there all the time, and you
Yeah.
can meet somebody at any point in time in your life that's going to change your life and come in and really be a blessing to you. But we got to be ready for that. We want to be
Yes.
as ready for that as possible. So yeah, but it's tough when you're going through this. But yes, have hope and just focus. This can be a great thing for you if you do it right.
Oh, thank you so much for that share. I believe that's going to give so much comfort and reassurance to people who actually, we all want hope. We want to feel that the feeling of hope. And what you have just said there, I think really just leans into that for the audience. So, Brian, it might actually weave into one of my parting tradition questions as we bring this conversation to a close, which is for you to leave the audience with one key takeaway to help them along their journey of love, life, and well-being. I know you've done a
Uh,
fantastic share there.
yeah.
Is there anything else that you would like to add?
Yeah, I mean, honestly, the one I always, yeah, you're right. I pretty much just did that, but I do believe that number one, if you're sorry, it's okay to look at ourselves and accept that we probably are part of the issue here. We probably have some problems here in relationship, and so we have to take ownership of our side of that and how we're showing up in that relationship. And so, don't be afraid to look at yourself. If you're a guy, a lot of times as men, we don't want to admit that we're broken, we have issues, or we're having all these other things going on here. We blame everybody else. We're always pointing the finger at the other side of it. And we have to stop doing that. The first thing we have to do in order to really start changing this and turning this around is take ownership on our side. We cannot say I'm only reacting because of the way they're doing things.
Yeah,
At the end of the day, it's how we're acting. Our actions are what's showing our spouse who we are and what we are and all those things. So we can't stop we have to stop passing the buck and take ownership and begin this healing work and be willing to do the work. But yeah, that's my one thing. Start simple. Don't be too hard on yourself. It doesn't have to happen overnight, although you can make great changes very quickly. And just be a little bit patient, but also dive in and see where this can take you. And I promise you, if you've been struggling like me, your whole life trying to figure this out, you may be right on the verge right now of actually this could be the beginning of like the end of that garbage and starting the news chapter. I always talk about a Super Bowl. I always say like a Super Bowl. When you take a Super Bowl and you throw a Super Bowl on the ground, the harder and faster you throw a Super Bowl, the higher that thing is going to bounce, right? And so if you feel like you're hitting the ground really hard right now and times are tough, I promise you, if you do it right, you can bounce really high like that Super Bowl. And last but not least, I used to think that these things were punishing me. These difficult moments, these breakups, these problems, these issues. At the end of the day, they're not here to punish you. This moment is to actually help you and to help you grow and help you change. So number one, you don't have to stay stuck in a relationship that was mediocre or even broken to begin with. And number two, you can move on to something really great. This is to bless you. This is to bless you. And if you do it right, you will find on the other side the blessing like my wife and I did, so it's very possible.
yeah. I love that outcome. I love the outcome because you did the work and your wife came along with you on that journey too. And this is the beauty of the integrated attachment theory program as well, that is there to support people through that process and to bring people back together, to save relationships, to actually be in alignment with your mission, which is to save relationships. So Bryan, thank you so much for the conversation today, for all that you have shared, for that final word too. So encouraging. If the audience, I know you already spoke about a link before, but if the audience do want to connect with you, where can they find you?
Yeah. Please go to my website, myrelationshipfail.com. You can take the attachment style quiz right there. Quick and easy to do. You can learn what your attachment style is. That's fun to do. And if you want to delve into the work, join the personal development school. That's Tice Gibson School through my website. And when you do that, I want to give you a free session anyway. I want to talk to you. I want to hear what you're going through, see what we point you in the right direction. If you want to work, there's a treasure trove of videos and different workbooks that you can do in there on your own. If you decide you want somebody to help you through that process, I also offer up my services as well. We could talk about doing some coaching and moving the needle a little bit faster for you, but definitely begin the work. And that's where you can find me though, myrelationshipfail.com.
Yeah, brilliant. Thank you for that. And as I mentioned before, I'm going to drop all of the details in the show notes, so it's easy to find and clickable too. Bryan, once again, thank you so much for this conversation. It's been so educational. And also, I'm so happy and pleased to hear that your relationship has shifted and that it's leveled up, so to speak. The breakup led to the level up. And I absolutely love that. So once again, thank you. And for everybody who has listened to this wonderful conversation, I want to thank you for your time, for your attention, and for your energy. And until the next episode, take great care of yourself and others too.